Hey, welcome to Exit Interview. This podcast is about women who build successful careers within structured, firm based environments and then chose to build something of their own. These conversations aren't about rejecting institutions or traditional practice, they're about agency, alignment, and how success changes when you step into ownership. Today's guest is Ritu Saheb, founder and principal of Saheb Architecture, a New York-based practice focused on adaptive reuse, historic preservation, and thoughtful urban transformation. Ritu's work centers on revitalizing complex, often century-old buildings, while navigating the realities of public sector processes and collaboration. She brings a global perspective to her work, shaped by her upbringing in Mumbai and her life and practice in New York City. Beyond her firm, she's also a very active mentor and advocate for women and underrepresented professionals in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. Ritu, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Duty.
To start us off, can you tell us a little more about yourself in your own words, who you are, what your practice focuses on, and what kind of work you're most engaged with right now?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for the warm welcome. I'm
Absolutely.
absolutely thrilled to be the first guest on this podcast. And what Duty is doing is amazing. And I wish her all the best. And I hope there are some key takeaways for the audience as well. So I'm Ritu Saheb. I'm an architect, founder of architectural firm Saheb Architecture, right in Midtown Manhattan. I was born in India. I grew up in Mumbai, which at this time I believe is a city of 20 million people, and moved from there to the New York area way back in 1996. So I went through hit all the various phases and finally arrived to establishing Saheb Architecture. We focus on revitalizing older buildings because New York is full of them. They have a lot of life in them. They have a great need of love. So we change the use as frequently is required in big, vibrant cities from one use to another use. And we also historically restore these buildings. So that's among some of the things we do right here in New York.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. Let's talk a little bit about your early life. So you said you were born in Mumbai and later moved to New York. How did those very early urban experiences shape the way you now think about buildings and cities?
Yes, it was a key experience because since I have been here in the past few years, India has become the most populated country of the world. So, number one, people understand the Indian context. India has sort of gotten on the map, not only from the tech perspective, but also from the perspective that it is the most populated country in the world. I grew up in a very, very dense Mumbai, and Mumbai's density is actually twice that of New York and four times that of London. Meaning, there's a lot of people piled up on top of each other or horizontally in a very small amount of space. And I think that's helped me understand and stay true to what I'm doing, which is urban buildings. Find it very difficult if you have grown up in a suburb or if you have grown up in a single family house to really appreciate a city. And I think it's having lived in Mumbai that's led to this love of being right in the center of New York. I'm in downtown Manhattan, surrounded by a vast population. And people ask me every day, they're like, why don't you move to the suburbs? I'm like, no, this is where I want to be. So I think that was growing up in Mumbai that has affected the choice of the practice that I wanted to focus on, the way I approach it, and the amount of effort I apply to it because I really appreciate the context. I think that's one of the few things that Mumbai has influenced the practice in New York.
I totally understand what you mean when you say you want to stay in the city and can't imagine the suburbs. I live
Yes.
not too far from Midtown Manhattan myself, so I can't really even, I can't fathom the thought of moving to like upstate or anything. So totally feel you. So did New York feel familiar because you had moved from a very dense city that was Mumbai to another similarly dense city? So did that feel familiar or very different when you first moved?
Yes and no. It did feel familiar because it was very dense. I moved on in what has since become Little India, 28th and Lex. It was not Little India when I moved back there in late 90s. Um, so it did feel familiar because there was a vast number of people around me, yes. But the processes, the way the offices work, that was completely different. So I
Mm,
had to, first, when I got to New York, I said, hey, I can just go to different offices, carry my portfolio, ring the bell, get in, introduce myself, get an introduction. If anyone has done that before, or if you are trying to do, have thought about it, you can't get into the building. You have to be buzzed up. You
yeah.
cannot get past the guard. So that's very different from Mumbai. In Mumbai, I was able to do that. So yes and no is the answer.
So yeah, that's a very like scrappy way of trying to find a job, right? You start knocking on the doors and you hope that somebody will pick up your resume. I've had a similar experience. So how did you land that first job? Was that intimidating? And like how did you bring your practice from Mumbai to New York?
It was a much longer process than I
Yeah.
thought, and I landed it the high tech way. So,
Yeah.
walking on the streets and landing into the buzzing the offices didn't work. I
Mm,
found it through the wanted job in New York Times, but through online. So, online was new. New York Times was available online, and there was a need for an architect. The country was growing. This is 1997. They could not find skilled architects,
mm.
and that's why the business where I ended up, they were willing to consider an immigrant like myself. So yeah, so it was the introduction of internet which helped me find the job.
Hmm. Wow. Um, wow, that's incredible. I haven't heard any stories during that time of applying for jobs, so very interesting. So let's fast forward a little bit. So before you started your own firm, you spent a few years working in a couple of established practices. How would you describe that phase of your career? Were there aspects that started to feel very limiting over time?
Uh, as I would describe it as rigorous, which is what the intention is. As you know,
Yeah.
we are
Hmm.
licensed professionals. We need to undergo training with a licensed architect in order to obtain the license. And that's what you learn in these firms, as you have as well in HUK. And these systems, which are really intense and they're being designed so a newcomer can learn them and integrate them with their own practice, because design is not just design, it's design and construction, which is a massive undertaking. There's a lot of people involved, there's a lot of risks, there's a lot of money being invested in these buildings. So we have to, as architects, do our job properly. And that's what I learned in these various architectural firms. So it's interesting you asked me about being limiting, and the reason, my way of not making it limiting was by being a consultant. So I wasn't a W-2 employee, I was 1099, which gave me a lot of freedom. So I could still get the training from different firms,
Right.
but I was still sort of an outsider, which is how I kept my freedom. I could dictate my hours, my workload, and so on and so forth.
That's great to know because I don't think a lot of people know that there are other options beyond being a full-time employee with a firm. You can actually, take on a contractor role as well, like you said. And I think those are options to think about before starting your own firm, right? Would you recommend?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
definitely. So it gets you on the way because you're independent.
Hmm.
Your contract may not be renewed, and but it's definitely, I've always been independent in my thinking, and this is the path I chose. So there's definitely risk. You're not an employee, you're sort of in that semi area where you're not a fully your own business, but you're not an employee, and you definitely have to be comfortable with not knowing if your
Right.
contract's going to be renewed or not. So yeah,
Right. So really being comfortable with uncertainty and not
absolutely.
finances is a big topic and people tend to think about that. I have a stable job and I can't really quit that because how am I going to pay rent? But I think you for you it was really your life experiences that shaped who you are and made you this really independent woman who decided to start your own practice, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so during your time with that practice, or with the practice that you were at before you started your own firm, was there like a specific moment that was pivotal in you wanting to take that leap, even though you were a consultant or a contractor with them? Um,
Yes.
mhm,
Yes. So I'm glad you asked me about the moment because I think most of us can identify that moment. So when I was in India, I had my own practice, which is
mhm,
possible as a young person in India because there was so much of new construction going on. And even as a student, I was running construction sites while I was going to college. When I came to US, of course, as an immigrant, you have to get your visa, learn the ways of the country and so on and so forth. But the pivotal moment for me was actually the real estate meltdown in 2008.
mhm,
So that was a great time for change in the country. And I had taken a few years off to run another business, but I was getting
mhm,
back into architecture, and I chose to get back at a very bad time when no jobs were to be had for architects. So I did
mhm.
get in briefly as a consultant with some firms, but then there was an ad on Craigslist by an architectural firm
Mm.
saying, come join us as your own person and build your own practice, but
Wow.
within our umbrella. So this
Mhm,
person was incredibly creative in how he wanted to deal with the crisis, with the economic crisis, which was the biggest uh, depression since 1929. So what he said was, come bring your own buck, your own black book, your own clients, your skills. You can work under my umbrella, use my resources, use my people to do the drawing production, use my copier, use my office,
wow.
keep your clients, perform your job. So I said, wow, I could not move to my own business in a safer environment. This seems to be very, very safe for me. So even though the economy has gone down, I don't know what's going to happen in 2 years. I think this is a great way I get started. So that's what I did. So
Mm.
I came in as my own person. I drummed up my own client list. I
Wow.
established all the skills in a very safe space in this firm to learn networking, marketing, performing the job, and so on and so forth. So yeah, so that was a
Yeah.
pivotal moment. It was 2008 when the
Wow.
economy was down.
And how did you come across this opportunity? Like, it was in the newspapers or
It
word
was
of
on
mouth?
Craigslist. Craigslist
Craigslist.
used to
Okay.
be big back then. I'm not
Yeah.
sure what's
Yeah.
happened now, Duty, but yeah.
Wow, yeah, I think Craigslist is still around. From last time I heard, but it's so interesting because I've heard stories about the 2008 recession and architects being laid off and pursuing other careers, or even just thinking of it as a downfall. But you decided to really flip the script and thought this is the right moment for me to launch my practice.
It
Uh,
was. I had
yeah.
huge changes in personal life as well. I was going
Mm-hmm.
through, I was switching back to architecture after having
Mm.
been a part time mother. I was out of the field, I was coming back to architecture. I was separating from my ex husband as well. And so,
Wow.
it was the time, the life had said, this is the time I have to move on. The depression happened, the recession
Yeah.
happened, was its own thing. So I said, okay, recession is here. I got all the other bad things going. Let this bring it on. So I just had to jump in.
You just kept an open mind
Yes.
to everything, which is, I think, a
Yeah.
really important quality to have
Yes.
when you're launching into your own business. So, wow, that's, yeah, you hear even stories about the 2020, COVID wasn't as bad as the recession back in 2008, but it was similar. A lot of people lost money, a lot of people made a lot of money. So it really depends on how you view things. Um, and okay, so let's talk about your practice. When you started the practice, right? You said you started the practice under someone's umbrella. You had these resources. Did you have a mission and kind of a vision in mind? And what did you want the practice to stand for? Yeah.
The mission came a little bit later.
Okay.
So at that time, I was just trying to learn the ropes.
Mm,
I may appear to be very suave and very comfortable in the social environment, but this is a learned skill. In fact, in
mm,
2009, I was so bad, I had to attend a full day seminar on how to network. So
Wow.
yes,
Okay.
absolutely. So the mission and all came much later. So when I got more comfortable, went through few more changes and so on, and that's when I was completely independent. I left the umbrella company, moved
Mm,
on to Saheb Architecture. That's when we had the mission, and the mission was to, since I'd already worked as my own person at the firm, uh, to try harder.
mm,
So we have seen people building, designing and building in New York is hard by itself, just because of the regulations, just
yeah.
because of the rent control, just because of the landmarks. So working with an architect should not be as hard. I think we already
Mm,
have a lot of issues going on. I think an architect's job is to make those things easier.
mm,
So we had learned how to navigate this regulatory environment, and
right.
my job was to make it much easier to be hired as an architect, for a client to work with an architect,
Mm,
specifically with older buildings, because older buildings, I think the rehabs, the renovations, the changes
yeah.
had simply gone through the roof for the older buildings. We had much more
Right.
respect for them, and
Mm.
demolishing them was no longer an option. So that's when the mission, I think, came into play, almost in 2015 or 16. That was 10 years ago.
Interesting. So you basically your practice responded to a need that
Yes,
was really important in New York City back then, and it was a need that needed to be filled at the
absolutely.
time.
That's correct.
Incredible. So would you say that when someone's starting out on their own, you might not necessarily have everything figured out, but as long as you keep an open mind and just, as they say, throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks, um,
Yes.
that's, yeah, that's the best way to
So,
go.
yeah, so being an entrepreneur means you have to constantly change. And that's just the way it is. I think there's lots of
Right.
statistics, surveys about it, that you come in with an idea, but then
Mm,
with what happens to you during your practice, you learn that you have to adapt. So you
mm,
definitely have to have an open mind. And secondly, I think the difference between, I'm told, or I've read, between men and women is men do not figure everything out, well, as women do. They're like, oh,
yeah,
I need to have my logo in place, I need to have the first 5 clients in place,
yeah.
or this is how I'm going to be spending my 6 hours every day.
Mm,
I that hasn't helped me. It's not been so much in my character as well. But yeah, it's impossible to figure everything out because you don't yet know what you need. So I think that should not
yeah,
stop you from going to the next step, because you will figure it out eventually. Just like a child
right.
learns to walk, even if it's learning to
Yeah.
walk a bit late, you will figure it out. So I think
Mm,
that should not stop you from keeping on moving. So don't
right.
waste your time figuring everything out, and be ready to adapt.
That's a really good point. I feel what you're saying as a type A personality. I feel like everything needs to be figured out before you even take that leap. Let's talk about finances because that's something that's on everyone's mind. We're thinking, okay, do we have that 1 year of rent saved up? Can I support my family in that 1 year that I'm trying things out? Was that something that crossed your mind before you started cyber architecture?
So I've been extremely lucky in many different ways, because I'm old school in that way. I do have a family, I do have a partner, so there's another
Hmm.
job. So, secondly, my first business in New York was way back in 1999, which has been profitable. Not
Hmm.
architecture related, so I can't really talk about it. So I had some resources.
Great.
But yes, you won't be able to start making money right away. uh, you have to pay your employee before you pay yourself. That's how you grow. That's just the way it is. And there are tons of studies on when you start your business, just hang in there. How many of them go out bust? So you have to come in that I'm going to apply myself 150%, not just 100%. That's not enough to keep you going. So
Hmm.
finances wasn't such an issue, provided I could see that growth from year to year. I could see that growth. So that was my approach to the business.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I think it's a very valid fear, whether you're, in graphic design or just even starting a laundromat business. It's really a valid fear. And so when you kind of stepped into that role of well, you were a principal from the very beginning, right? You were the founder
Correct.
of your business, you were the designer, you're all of it. When you started hiring your first employees, like how long did it take for you to hire and really feel that need to delegate part of your um, work to someone else?
So I hired in year two my
Okay.
first employee, and it
Hmm.
was part time. I did a trial run. I
Hmm.
said, so I've since then I've developed a very rigorous hiring process, just so that we're a good match and we use our time well. So I did a trial run and then had the employee for 20 hours a week. And
Hmm.
then if we were not able to fill the full 20 hours, then she would perform other duties, cleaning out systems, maybe perhaps marketing, doing brochures, that kind of stuff. Uh, yeah, and I knew right away that's an investment in the future because if I wanted to have X number of employees, though I think that was the wrong way to go about it. It's growing the business. But if I didn't see an employee right away or within when I was able to pay her, then when am I going to get employees? So that helped me
Yeah.
really crystallize the idea of a business because if I'm just alone, I'm a consultant as I was always before.
Hmm.
So I do need employees for it to be a real business, and I needed to see them in front of me, and I needed to delegate and so on. And yeah, so what it did was it had helped free up my time to
Hmm.
go and do more rainmaking, which has become my
Yeah.
specialty since. I'm a best representative of my business. I can go out there, sell our services way better than anyone can just because all these things have been taken off my shoulder and someone else is managing that.
Hmm. That makes sense. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think not a lot of architects or, solopreneurs even feel the need to hire until maybe their fourth or fifth year, and they're just maybe they're afraid to delegate. I think that's a thing that I've heard consistently is it takes them a really long time to get hire their first employee. And would you say that that's probably a mistake, and they should probably think about it a lot earlier on?
I think it depends on what your goal
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Right away, I knew that I wanted a bigger practice, so I
Yeah.
wanted a lot of employees. But I think many architects want to keep it the studio quality, and they
Mm.
don't really want to, they like to do the design more than the business aspect of it. So if that's the
Mhm.
reason they got in, that's how they want to stay, I think that's perfectly fine. And I
Mhm.
also know of a lot of firms who have outsourced drafting and drawing production to India. So they
Yeah.
sort of have outsourced it abroad. They don't really have employees, but in a way they do. But they handle it differently. So I think there's many
Mhm.
options
Mhm.
depending on what your objective is.
Right.
And things have changed, since I first started in the business as well. Usually, bigger firms did have contract employees. I'm sure HOK had a lot of contract employees,
Mhm.
depending on how long the contract lasted. Then there were these outsourcing drafting shops where you could just give the stuff to.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it depends. It
Mhm.
depends. I think
Yeah.
employees should not be. There is no fixed pattern. There's
Yeah.
no path you have to follow. It depends on what you want out of your business.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. In terms of you getting clientele, you mentioned early on, you pursued clients. Um, if you compare the very first client that you got versus a client that you got 5 years later, were there certain characteristics or let's say filters that you used to really get the client you wanted to work with?
Yes, I
Yeah.
definitely had to reevaluate,
Hmm.
every year as to whether I want to keep the client. Is this the client I want to pursue? Or I want a different kind of a client. So in the
Hmm.
beginning, just like most people do, I took on a lot of different kinds of work. I developed a lot of different sort of skills just to, it helped me in building up the business, building up a name, building a small clientele, developing some skills, and so on and so forth. And later I had to decide which area do I want to be an expert in. So I can only say yes when I say a lot of no. So that's the philosophy I started following, which is that, if I want to stick to, we did a converting townhouse space we were in
Hmm.
for a few years, 4 to 5 years, which was basically converting townhouses or 1 to 4 unit buildings into 1 to 4 or more. So that was a specific kind of client, and then we decided to go to bigger clients.
Mm,
So yeah, it's changed. What's not changed is the discipline that I used to pursue a client,
right.
but the kind of client has definitely changed.
And what would you say that discipline was when you pursue a client?
So I used to have a book which talked about X number of phone calls I'm going to make, or X number of
Okay.
meetings I'm going to go to, or the emails I'm going
Yeah.
to send out. So it was a number game in the beginning, which is,
Yeah.
because I didn't know how effective I am. So I definitely have to put in, have that volume.
Yeah.
So even though, like I said, I was so bad at networking, I had to attend a workshop on how to network. I definitely still went to the network events. I did not collect everyone's card, but I said, okay, I'm going to have to speak to at least three people.
Mm,
Got me out of my shell.
yeah.
So that's the discipline. Even though that's something I
Right.
don't really like, I said, hey, if you don't like talking to people, you don't want to network, then maybe you should not start a business. So,
I
so
agree
I
with that.
think, yeah, I had to grow in many different directions, which I didn't want to. But since I started the business, uh, it was perfectly acceptable because my bigger goal was the business.
Right.
So I think pursuing, there's so many different ways of getting a client. It's all out there.
Hmm.
And if you don't pursue it, you don't get a client. So you have to pursue that.
Right. And yeah, it seems like almost every day you really got out of your comfort zone. You said, if I've decided to do this and it's now or never, and I have to take it all the way.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
And I think, especially when it comes to introverts, they say, you can probably build a business from behind the screen, but, would you say that the old-fashioned way of going out and really meeting people face to face is, builds more trust than being behind a screen like we do now?
Definitely. No,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. So I remember the days when we had in-person design meetings, we printed out the drawings, we spent
Hmm.
2 hours getting coffee and so on and so forth. And nowadays, the same meeting can get done in like 30 minutes online. But what I'm
Yeah.
losing is the contact with that client face to face. What I'm
Mm.
losing is their trust. What I'm losing is they may not feel so warmly about me, even though we're doing a great work, to refer us because that connection is not there. So what I do
Mm.
is I try to do more of these construction meetings. I go to construction site even if I'm not required to be there. I do a lot of just coffee meetings with clients because so I think it's very important to get out of online. Just getting it done is not enough for a business because business you have that other stuff which is you have to grow, you need more trust. Just getting a meeting done, getting drawings done, getting it built is not what it's all about. It's much more than
Right.
that.
Yeah. Wow. It seems like you have a typically very busy day.
Yes.
What does that typical day look like from when you wake up, I guess? Yeah.
So I have many hats, as you know. So
Yeah.
yesterday I worked on 8 different projects, 8 different contracts. But all it needs is when the jobs are stuck, when my staff is waiting for me to, take them to the next level. So I just have to make sure things keep moving. So it's probably 15 minutes on each job. I went to a construction site. We had a meeting just because our engineering drawings are late from another consultant and we don't want the construction to come to a halt. So I did that. Then I had a lot of online meetings with my crew. We had marketing meetings. We touched base on our goals for this year. Everyone was
Mm.
present so
Okay.
that they are informed and know which direction we are headed in. We had a projects meeting where everyone talked about the projects they are working on. So that was a busy Monday, but it was more project related. Other
Hmm.
days, I think, because it's a new year too, so I'm
Yeah.
establishing new systems.
Yeah.
But other days, I think my job is probably 20% the actual projects that we're delivering because my staff is taking care of it, and
Mm.
80% everything else. So 80% is the leadership role, as in going out there, being the face of the company, attending events, making relationships, forming teams.
Yeah.
That's usually my role. Or even doing accounting or meeting with people to
Wow.
help us with new systems, where you wear a hat, you wear many hats as a business
Right.
owner.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what my day is like.
So you're saying you can't possibly delegate everything. You still do need to oversee a few things in your business, right?
As of now, yes.
Yeah.
So the staff has to be stable for some time, and which we are
Hmm.
finally able to achieve after COVID and changes and so on and so forth. So that's why I can delegate a lot. I know how things are proceeding. I know where every staff members' limits lie, what I need to step into and not. So I'm delegating more and more. So, but I think at every, at any point, I would definitely like to be informed how the project is moving along. Maybe that will
Yeah.
change next year. If you do one of these next year, I'll let you know. But as of now, yeah,
We'll definitely have you
20% is
back
pretty good.
for a sequel. Yeah. Um, let's talk about your advocacy and you're spending a lot of time and energy mentoring young women, young professionals. Um, why has that been so important to you, and why do you expend so much of your energy doing that?
So it's very important to me because, as you may remember, I began my journey as a 25-year-old young architect in New York.
Hmm.
And many women my age will say, hey, I wish someone mentored us. And I didn't. There was definitely this competition between women in the field, as in the industry. Women were not mentoring each other. At least that was my experience. Many of them tried to get me out of the way, which I think does not help anybody. Men mentored me, which was fantastic. I'm very glad to have some great architect bosses that I worked with, which is I was able to set up my own practice. So, the world goes on. Being an architect is hard enough. I think the
Yeah.
stats said that it takes 14 years to become a licensed architect. So I'm part of that cog in the machine. I'm part of New York, which has so many buildings, and we provide value. So that's one of the reasons. So I mentor men, women, mostly they're women. I mentor women who are going through licensing, women who have had their license, they need to make life decisions, they need to move. I mentor women who have just had children because I talked about when I had my daughter, when she was 5, I got back into the field of architecture, which I did very creatively and was able to succeeded tremendously, but other women are not able to. So a lot of women come
Yeah.
to me for advice as to with young kids, how do they establish their practice or how do they come back after being a mother, full-time mother. I do that. So we have a lot of people on our staff who are young parents, men and women both. We have meetings with the baby on the lap and we're having our meetings and the
Wow.
project is going on. I mentor in NAVIC, which is a National Association of Women in Construction, and we run CAD competition for a school in Ozone Park. So these are high schoolers. They are fantastic. I've never seen anyone draft that well. People who
Wow.
come out of colleges are not able to draft that well. So
Yeah.
I mentor them because I want to make sure they have opportunities in life. They're able to use that skill. So excuse me, Diti, I have sun
Yeah.
coming in. Maybe I'll just change my
No
angle
problem.
if that's okay.
No problem. Take your time. I can always edit out anything. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so it is, it's not just me, it's a lot of people who make this happen.
Yeah.
And I do want to help talent like me to come up. I was helped by many, I was not helped by many. There's so many opportunities out there. People make assumptions, just because maybe you're young or you're a mother or you're an immigrant or you're older or you don't speak English so well. So, and these people still have talent, young and old,
Yeah.
and so on. And I want to, I guess I'm a mother, I'm a nurturer. So my natural instinct is to mentor many different types of people to just bring out their talent.
Yeah. Wow. I have to say that is very noble. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to pursue a female mentor, and this might be controversial, but I've had male mentors, just like you said, who've been more helpful and who really wanted me to succeed in my job or that role that I've had. So I can definitely resonate with that. I think that's a very real thing in the industry. Um, and Okay, so we are coming a little bit uh, to the end. Um, if you talked a lot about wanting to inspire women who are like you, or when you were 25. If someone's listening right now who's really invested in architecture but questioning their next step, is there something you would like them to know to really push them to make that decision?
I think one would do very well if you go with your dream,
Hmm.
because if you have a dream and you're passionate about it, no matter what the issues are, you're going to overcome them.
Yeah.
But if you pursue something that's not your dream, I don't think it'll go too far. So even if it's hard, if it's your passion, I think in the long run it's going to be a lot easier. And I think you should have that vision about that life that you want to
Hmm.
live, or that building you want to build, or a
Hmm.
culture you want to be part of. And I think that you should keep going in the direction that you really, really want, rather than settling for something else. I think in the long run, that's the best way to go in life.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think a lot of a lot of women, a lot of architects I've spoken to are still in traditional practice with larger firms, or they've been with these firms for so many years, and um, I think just having that confidence to take the leap and start their own business is it's really rare to see that. I think from what I've noticed, it's not a large percentage, and there's a reason for
That's right.
that. They need qualities, like what you mentioned. They need to be open. They need to be
Yeah.
they shouldn't be risk averse, and yeah, it's so there's a lot of qualities I think that you need. Um, Lastly, if you were to look back 18 years ago when the recession happened, um, and maybe you could go back in time, but what is that one thing that you're most proud of, that you made that pivotal decision when the recession happened? What's that one thing that really pushed you and said, this is it's now or never, I'm gonna see it all the way?
It was because of the life change.
Hmm.
So I was still, I guess, in a way, pretty new to New York. I'd never worked in architectural business in New York City. I'd only worked in Westchester and so on.
Hmm.
And even though the world was coming crashing down, I said, this is my moment because it aligns with what's going on in my personal life.
Hmm.
And I did say, this is now or never. If I don't do this now, it could never happen, because I would, I'm taking so many risks in my personal life. What's one
Yeah.
more risk? And I
Yeah.
did have a young daughter who was 5. I was a single mother for a while, and
Oh.
it was risky.
Yeah.
But then I also had a lot of support.
Hmm.
So I would say, think about that support you have, because you're not without support. It could be the resource in terms of your way you can get knowledge. Of course, people helping you out. I had to literally have my brother's family in New Jersey do the babysitting. I had to take
Oh.
my daughter early on construction sites before construction began, so she could stay outside. All the contractors knew her. She was 5 years old. So I
Amazing.
think you have to make that decision, because if you don't say now, it could definitely be never. So I'm
Mm.
really, really proud of that. That a lot of people discouraged me, when I read
Yeah.
this ad in Craigslist. They said, hey, even on Wall Street, if you're selling something, this is the amount of commission you get. Or if you're running under someone's umbrella, this is the structure. I said, no, what I'm going to learn is how to really take my practice, build up my practice, and go all the way. So I'm willing to take that risk. And yes, it worked out. So you have to make that jump, and you have to go with your gut as well.
Hmm.
And trust yourself. You're not going to be fooled. It's only going to be good for you. And this
Yeah.
unknowns in life, but if the unknowns finally lead you to that happiness you're looking for, I think that's a better unknown than the unknown where you don't even have any unknowns, and you know for sure you're not going to be happy.
Yeah.
So I'm really, really proud that in 2008, where I thought, as a young single mother, these guys can work 60 hours a week, but I have to go, my daughter's off on Fridays, I have to go pick her up after school. These things are going to stop me from building my practice, but they didn't. I was pleasantly surprised how many people were rooting for me,
Wow.
New York art. So that support is out there. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people. So don't focus on the negatives. Just do it. Like Nike
Yeah.
says, just do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah, you don't I think one thing you mentioned is asking for help when you need it, and not a lot of people maybe have the courage to do that, right? They think, maybe what if they say no or they turn me down, but asking anyway, because how would you know if you don't ask, right?
People want to help you. People
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
help you. Lots of people, they're like,
absolutely.
hey, you want to drop off your daughter while you're doing the work? We have a nanny anyway, might as well take care of her. I was
Yeah.
very surprised. So yeah, a lot of people want to help you. You should definitely take them up on that.
That's great. And you also normalize bringing your child to the
Yes.
construction site, which is something we never see. And another reason I think why motherhood holds a lot of women back is because they think that it's not possible or they have these limitations. But you've proved that there are no limitations, and anyone can do it. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much, Ritu. I'm so inspired. I'm leaving today with so many thoughts and hoping that this would inspire the next generation of of women and that nothing would hold them back when they want to take that big leap. And, this conversation, again, is a reminder that independence is not about leaving something behind, it's about building on what came before with intention. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop now.
Thank you, Duty.